So when to use the extension, and when do composers ask us to actually use the extension, and do we sometimes make it up as we go? The answer to that second question is yes. Hey everybody, it's your boy Joe Conyers doing a video on extensions. I've always wanted to say that it's your boy Joe Conyers because that's what people say. It's your boy. It's a boy? No, it's your boy. That's me, Joe Conyers. Anyway, today I'm talking about extensions. Not hair extensions because they don't, yeah, I'd have some issues with that. But actually extensions on the double bass. This extension, as you can see from here, and actually it's out of the picture, but now it's in the picture, this extension. So I get questions all the time. What is that thing sticking up on the head of your bass? The extension is actually what the words say, what it implies. It extends the low notes in the low end of the double bass. So generally the low strings of the bass are the low strings. They're all low strings. We play the double bass. The strings of the double bass are G, D, A, E. We have, our strings are of course correct, and the violins might recognize this as their strings, but the violins are opposite of us because the basses have it in the correct order and they just do it separate. So their high string is E, A, D, G. But I digress. So G, D, A, E are strings, and this is standard for the double bass. So just to give you perspective, the lowest note on the violin is this G. So actually, it actually exists on the violin. This is the G string on the violin. That's the lowest note possible. On the viola, the lowest note on the viola is this note, a low C. That's the lowest note on the viola. The lowest note on the cello is an octave below that C, which goes to this E. That's the lowest note on the cello. And the lowest note on the bass generally is this E. But not when you have an extension. When you have an extension, that lowest note can actually go all the way down to an octave below the, that was not an octave, an octave below this C to this C. That is one of the lowest notes that you'll ever hear in the orchestra. So why do we have this in the first place? Why do basses generally have the strings up in the low E? Like, what's going on? So here's the deal, y'all. I should have looked up some history on this, but I'm going to tell you just from my own life experience, and maybe I'll do another video on the history of this. But in Europe, generally there are 5-string basses, and 5-string basses have the exact same strings as this bass, G, D, A, E. But then they actually have a B string, so it keeps that fourth going all the way across, but then adds another fourth down to the low B. So I can't tell you. I don't know if bass players just thought that, well, we don't necessarily have to go down to the notes, or we can, and we'll make it, it's just easier to get around the bass with 4 strings. Someone will have to look that up. Maybe you can put it in my comments. Put it in my comments below and educate me. Like, put it there so I know. I'm just telling you what I know. And that is, the standard setup in the States is G, D, A, E, just the 4 strings. So, but when you had that extra 5th string, you could play a lot of low notes without doing anything. It's just that you have 5 strings on your bass. I've played 5-string basses. They actually drive me nuts. And they don't drive me nuts because they're 5-string basses. They drive me nuts because the A string, this string, is in the middle of the bridge. That's really head trippy, y'all. My brain can only handle so much in life, so it's very, very hard. So instead of having a 5-string bass, what generally happens here in the States is we add the extension. The extension takes us all the way down. So how does this work? Well, something I do with my kids when I'm doing a kids show, a saying that I tell them so they remember about the instruments that they learned that day is, that saying is, the bigger the instrument, the lower the sound. And I do that with kids all day. They love it. They love it. You can try it. Try it in your own shows. It's great. So the same rule that is, the bigger the string, or the longer the string, the lower the sound. So we need an extension to actually help us get to those low notes. So if I were to close, you see, this is what I have, what's called a fingered extension. And the fingered extension allows me to put my fingers on the extension, but I also have these closers. Some of the fingered extensions don't have closers. I love the closers, and I'll explain that in 2 seconds. But for now, so if I make the string this much longer from here to here, this E goes to E flat, and then this E flat, make it from here to here, goes to a D. This D from here to here goes to a C sharp, And then the C sharp from here to back here, where the nut is, will take you down to your low C. Now, this is why I like to have the closers on the extension. And if you have a choice, I would highly recommend get the closers. If you were to take a piece like the Brandenburg Concerto, number 3, this has this, it's a great piece, by the way, but it's got this octave part in the bass. And if you don't have a fingered extension, you'd actually have to close all the notes with your fingers. So if you don't have a closers on your fingered extension, I'm making sure I said that. So if there's a lick that goes, sorry, the bass is very low, so I can actually see it on camera. So to F, this is going to an E flat. I could do this, and then do E. I could do open D, which is great. If that line continued, I'd have to play C sharp, which sometimes matches what the music is. I'd have to go, which is possible, but it's a whole lot of work. And then a C, open C, you can obviously keep open. If you have the closers, it's way easier. And so if I were to do the exact same passage from the Brandenburg Concerto number 3, G to F, I can use the closer, open it, for the E flat, open the closer for the D. If I had the C sharp, I can open that, and then go to a C. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense, because a lot of people ask, like, why do you have these closers? And the closers really come in handy. There's something like a piece like the Brahms Requiem where you have just a pedal D. I can play the D, and like my hands are free. I don't have to like have my hand back here the whole time. That really does come in handy. Or if it's an E flat, where I'm playing, for example, Heldenleben. If I played Heldenleben lick, I don't have to actually close the E flat. I can play the open, and that makes a huge difference because it just takes one extra shift out of it. These are all tuned, and it's great to have someone who knows what they're doing with an extension to have your closers tuned so they are as close to pitch as possible. These are always quite reliant. The ones I use. This is made by Robertson and Sons Violin Shop a long time ago. This was probably put on this bass 12 years ago. This extension was put on this bass. So, and this is Norma. The closers on this bass, what they did to match Norma is they made them out of rosewood. So but they can be made out of Pernambuco, they can be made out of ebony. They're different, the closers can be made out of anything. And the extension, this part, from here to here, there we go, now you can see. The extension part you see from here to here is still made out of ebony. So this is ebony extension, and then these are the closers again, made out of rosewood. So when putting on an extension on the double bass, it can be a process. So let me explain. So first of all, I was saying I play a fingered extension. Yes, I was saying I was thinking about that because it's funny. The other extension, and they aren't made that often anymore, but they were really, really, really popular, particularly in the latter half of the 20th century, are these machines. And the machines, we'll have to get a picture and show it to you. This is a machine on a double bass, and the machines had the same closers, but the only way you operated them was with these pads here, where you actually depressed each lever, and the lever would open the actual pitch that you want. Now, this has advantages and disadvantages. I think one of the disadvantages you could say is tuning. Although, because you can't actually tune it at all. At least with this extension, I can play the D. If I don't like it, I can still change it. With this machine, you can't change it at all. And you have to get used to playing the bass, playing notes on the side. And it's like backwards, if I remember correctly. I think this is the E, and it goes down. Or this, I can't remember. It's been a long time. But you're like, well, how does anyone play with anything like that? I have to tell you, Bruce Bransby, former principal double bass of the Los Angeles Philharmonic, of course, huge bass pedagogue who taught at the Indiana University for many, many years. He was a machine fiend, and he would like to show off. I had the great pleasure of sitting next to him in the Aspen Festival Orchestra, my years at Aspen. a long time ago, and we were doing Beethoven 6, and he would just love showing off playing that lick. You bass players know what I'm talking about. I believe it starts on the D flat. Is it D flat? Yeah. And it's all written low. He could play the whole thing on the machine extension. It was quite impressive to see. Most people can't do that. I'm one of those people who cannot do it. I can't play with the real one. I think with fingers. So those are the machine extensions. The fingered extensions, I already mentioned like how useful they are and the advantages. But I just want to make sure we knew there were two different types. The machines, you see these like pipes and arms and all these kind of gadgets. So you move the levers here and it changes the pitch up there. The other thing I want to talk about is how you put it in the bass. So the top part of the extension, and actually I'll have to show you. So the top part of the extension is just literally fingerboard, ebony wood, extended all the way back to get to this low C. And it wraps around your scroll. Now the thing that scares a lot of luthiers and bass historians is the fact that with these extensions, you drill through the scroll. I don't think there's anything more horrifying to some bass, particularly bass historians or those who collect fine instruments, than someone taking a drill through a centuries-year-old piece of artwork and then drilling a hole through it. But that's what they do, and that's what they did to Norma. Norma has a hole drilled through her scroll, and then that hole takes it so that the string can go through the top of the scroll and into the peg box, where the strings, of course, wrap around so we can tune and all that fun stuff. What some bass players have done in modern times is to have the extension, but instead of drilling through the scroll of the bass, they'll put like a little tube, a clear tube that wraps around the scroll and then delivers the string into the peg box so that we can tune. So there you have it. I just want to make sure you knew about the construction. But let's address one little thing. Must you have an extension on your bass? An extension is an investment. Generally, I don't know what the cheapest extension might be on an instrument. I'm sure you might be able to find someone to put one on a bass, maybe for $1,000, $1,200. I don't know. I mean, I think this was 2,000, maybe even 2,500, 12 years ago. So I don't know what the extension, because I haven't had to buy one in a long time. What the prices are. If you have a bass, particularly if I know you might be in high school, and you're like, I really just want to put an extension on this bass. If you don't know if you're going to have that bass for a long time, I don't think it's worth the investment. It's just not. If you aren't going to have the bass for a long time, you'll pay all this money, and then sure, you can increase the value of the instrument by putting an extension on it, because the value of the instrument will not go down. However, generally when you're in high school, most people aren't rolling in cash. If you happen to be one of those students who are rolling in cash, have at it. Put the extension on, buy yourself a nice old Italian bass, like go to town. But if you aren't in that circumstance, I would hold off on the extension. I don't think it's that important to put it on an instrument that you may not be playing for a long time, particularly when the funds generally have to be redirected somewhere. I'd redirect the energy into a nice bow. I think a nice bow could go a long way in helping you to get where you want to, so you can finally have the instrument that you want to ultimately put that extension on. So that's just my 2 cents there. So when to use the extension, and when do composers ask us to actually use the extension, and do we sometimes make it up as we go? The answer to that second question is yes, we make it up as we go sometimes, but I'll go into that in a little detail. But I'll start with someone like Bach. All the Baroque composers, basically, and I should maybe know the reason for this, but there's a lot of maybe I do know exactly why. Oh, I can tell you exactly why. Maybe this is exactly why. So when you play Baroque music on the double bass, there are a lot of notes that are written below the low E. So the use of an extension is really comes really in handy for a lot of Baroque music. And The reason why is, do you know why we're even called the double bass? I mean, there's only one bass, right? Okay, maybe, okay, now we have double basses. Look at that. All right, we have Riley, and then we have Nora, but no. Do you know why it's called a double bass? It's because, I hope you know this, you may not realize, I didn't realize this until kind of late, even though I played piano. The double bass is a transposing instrument, so the notes that we see actually sound an octave below what we actually see. So for example, let's see if you have an A written on the first line of the bass clef staff, the top line. If a cellist plays that A, it'll sound like this. And if a bass player plays that A, it sounds like this. And we are literally a transposing instrument, but it's just down the octave. So we don't have to change keys, we don't do anything like that. So what's the relationship to being double bass? Well, in the Baroque era, the double bass generally doubled, you can see where this is going, doubled the cello. So, but they didn't call it the double cello because if you take that extra octave, it's technically double the bass. So it's actually even in the translation of contrabass, it takes it down. It's that contra, an octave down of that bass line, and so that's why we're called double bass, and that's kind of where it came from. So when playing a lot of basso continuo lines, can we all say that together? Basso continuo. Yes, when we play basso continuo lines from Handel or Bach or Vivaldi, we are generally playing the exact line as the cello. And because of that, there are all these extension notes written in, because for the cello, it's not an extension, it's just the cello goes down to a low C. This was the case for a lot of the Baroque era, and then as composers started to realize that the basses generally stopped at E, this is going through the classical and particularly early Romantic era, they stopped writing the low notes in the bass. And sometimes you could find some composers, and I think even Mahler asks for this, even Mahler, where he starts to specify tune, or even Brahms. I believe the Brahms Requiem actually has directions for low D. It's in this huge fugue, which is amazing in Brahms Requiem. But he actually writes for the bass players to tune down to the low D. And I believe Mahler asks sometimes that he only wants the low note played and never the upper note played in the other octave. So some composers were really, really specific, and some composers gave directions on tuning the string down. But in orchestra, it's a lot of Baroque music, not so much classical every once in a while, but not so much that early Romantic, even mid-Romantic, getting late as we start to switch, then we start to see more extension work. And then going to contemporary music, we see a ton of extension work, a ton. So it's very funny. In the repertoire, it's a lot of Baroque and a lot of modern music, but not a whole lot in the middle. So what do we do about those things in the middle? Well, let's take Brahms, for example. Brahms, my bass is low, so you can actually see it on the camera, so I apologize for any sound that you, my intonation fine. Hey, that's a D, good. So you know how the beginning of Brahms 2 begins? What a great opening. And it goes I don't know if I'm singing it right, because I'm thinking about this. Because the next thing Brahms writes in the part is, wait, give me a sec, hold on. So the whole time, just work with me. The whole time, the theme goes, and then the basses have. So you could say, well, that's what Brahms wrote and that's what Brahms intended, because Brahms was very smart. He was smart. As a matter of fact, he was so smart that he realized that the bass does not have a D sharp. However, the cellos who double us there have. So did he want the basses to completely drop out? Brahms' father, I think I'm getting this right, Brahms' father was a double bass player, so he knew where the bass could go, and Brahms was just smart. So what we do in orchestra, we make the executive decision of taking that E and taking that rest in that bar and adding the D sharp as the cellos do. So we get to so I'll do the opening. Da dee da 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 dee da da dee da dee da dee da 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 dee. And that's how it works. So while it's not written in the part, we have made an executive decision based on all of our knowledge. That knowledge being Brahms, he wrote his arrest, he didn't give the rest to the cellos, and it's the thematic material. So the D sharp probably, if the basis could play D sharp, Brahms would want that D sharp. So oftentimes we actually just make the executive decision to add the low notes as the cellos go down, even if it's not written in the double bass part. You can do this, we make these decisions sometimes, particularly at the ends of pieces, whether it's Berlioz, although Berlioz, he has a low C, because of the, did he write it though? I think, did he? He may not have written it, so that might, I think the end of Berlioz, what's that? We have those I don't even know if you know the piece, but it ends on a low C. The reason I remember that so specifically is because that's one of the times I broke a string in concert, was playing a low C, and that last low C in Symphony Fantastique. But I digress. So I just wanted to give some historical context as to when the extension is needed or was written for, and then how in the professional setting we use it as written by the composer, and sometimes we make it up as we go for dramatic effect. We do. There's even one lick in Brahms' Third Symphony where the music director of the Philadelphia Orchestra, Yannick Nézet-Séguin, turned to the basses, and we got to this part that has this B, and he goes, and whenever a conductor does this, the bass section normally does this. Particularly if you're playing a B. In Europe, the B is very, as I mentioned before, the B is played often because of the G, D, A, E, B string. But there are not a lot of Bs in the United States, but we have this C, but that's not going to play a B. I mean, I know we play low and most people can't hear the notes down there, but if the whole orchestra's in the key of a B and we're playing a low C, I don't think this is going to work. So what you need is a hip shot. And now you have a low B. And that will be in my next video. Thanks so much for watching my channel. Hope you enjoyed the content that I have. If you did, hit that subscribe button. I've got all kinds of videos on all things double bass, particularly playing, and my Instagram excerpts. Speaking of Instagram, I've got an Instagram channel, Weatherclef. I've got a TikTok channel, Weatherclef. And you see me here on YouTube, and you can even find me on Facebook if that's your thing, at Joseph Conyers. Y'all have a great day.